see. That's that. And that's Hello there, and welcome to the Hawkeye Hotspot podcast here on hawkfanatic.com. It is Thursday, December the 21st, about 9:15 a.m. Central Time. I am Rob Howe, joined as always by Scott Docterman from The Athletic. We've been at this for a while, so welcome back to those that are regulars, and welcome to those that may have not seen this before or heard this before. We appreciate everybody that listens and our sponsors as well. You've heard one coming in from Wild Rose Casino into the podcast. We'll have more throughout the podcast. Won't take up a lot of time, but they pay the bills. So we appreciate them all. Happy holidays to everyone. This will be the last podcast before some of the holidays hit us next week. And we'll dive in a little bit here with a couple Festivus celebration. We're a little early on that as well. That's not as Festivus falls on a Saturday this year, so should be good for Festivus parties on Saturday night. So we'll have a few problems that we have with you people, and we'll address those a little bit later on. We got a lot to talk about today, though. Scott, I wanted to start with kind of an overarching topic of roster management, and within that is the 2024 recruiting class that signed yesterday, guys that Iowa is waiting on, seniors that Iowa is waiting on whether or not they're going to come back, potential transfer portal. All of those things are kind of folded in under this roster management, which has become really, really difficult now because there's different timelines, right, for everybody, and you don't know when you're going to get clarity on this. We should have it here within the next month or so. What is the NFL draft deadline? Usually like the middle of January, right?
Yeah, I believe it's the 15th, but I can verify that really quick. So
yeah, so that's kind of the deadline. Cooper DeJean told us the other day he's in no rush. I get a sense that the coaches probably have a feel for what these guys are going to do or which way the lean is. But still, I mean, it kind of handcuffs you a little bit here. Not that that's a bad thing, because I think Iowa would be very happy if the six gentlemen that are deciding right now were to come back. It definitely would be most likely better than what you would get out of the portal or on the recruiting trail. They're guys that are in your system, guys that have played, started for the most part. So just kind of the difficulty in that. Where do you want to start on this? You want to start with the recruiting class? You want to start with senior decisions? I'll let you run with this.
Okay. I think, first we know the class, but we don't know the senior decisions as far as who's coming back, who's not. So I think that's probably a little bit more speculative and more interesting. And that is, Tyler Barnes had 6 players kind of making their own decisions right now, the extra year guys. Plus there's really 2 players with eligibility that, still remaining that have NFL decisions. So they're kind of waiting on them. They're not doing so impatiently, but I think that's, the next couple of weeks to month really dictate how they're going to progress. And when you look at the secondary and linebacking core, that's really, that's really a question mark. I mean, if they were to lose, let's say Cooper goes to the NFL and then Quinn decides, well, I'll give the NFL a shot, or dental school, and Castro decides to go, and Jamari Harris decides to go, then all of a sudden you're like, ooh, you've got some major holes you need to fill, and pretty quickly to do so. But if they all decide to return, in the secondary, and maybe Cooper goes to the NFL and the rest come back, or at least Jamari and Sebastian come back, then they have it. Then it's like, well, we're pretty good there. We don't need to worry about anything. So I think I know that the staff that deals with roster management are looking pretty hard still at the portal just to make sure if things happen one way or the other. But they feel pretty confident internally that a lot of these guys are going to come back. They think that. I was told yesterday by somebody I was talking to that they would think that it's more likely than not that, say, 5 out of 6 return versus 1 out of 6. So it's just a matter of kind of getting them to say yes. And in some ways, it's also if the right person says yes, then that's when probably people will follow. And I would say Jay Higgins would probably be the right person because he's commands the room in so many different ways. So, but then it comes down to after that, you're staring at 91 type scholarships. And that means some people are going to have to get medicaled and probably, and they don't seem to be too concerned with that. And I wouldn't be either. I mean, they've only lost 4 scholarship guys to the portal. You figure, Rob, we've been doing this a while. After the bowl game, 1, maybe 2 might decide, you know what, I don't know if I'm going to get a chance here. I'm going to take a look around. And then after the spring, there might be somebody else or 2 or 4 to decide to do the same thing. And then before you know it, even if all of them return and there's a couple, and maybe they go to the portal and grab a receiver or something like that, and then they still at like 83 scholarships going into the fall camp, and a walk-on gets 1 or something. So I don't think they're too overly worried about it, and really they probably shouldn't be.
No, and as you kind of referenced there's the transfer portal now, and then there's one in the spring as well. So it's not like if you don't get guys out of the portal this month right now that you're not going to be able to add to the roster next year before you get, and you sometimes, you have an injury in spring practice, or as Scott said, guys leave after spring, they get a better evaluation of where they stand in the program. So it's constantly fluid, more now than ever. I kind of just did a remedial rundown of scholarships yesterday. I had them at 82.
Yeah, 82.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
But I could be missing walk-ons maybe that have gotten scholarships. Where are you at?
I'm at 86.
Okay, so I'm missing 4 guys. Are you including the guys coming back? I took those guys out. I took like DeJean, Lachey, and then the 6. I took all those guys out. So
okay, well, I added Nick DeYoung because he's coming back.
I have him and McNamara as the 2 seniors that are definitely coming back.
And then I have I've kept Lachey and DeJean because they're still on it now. Right. Once they leave it, but you have 21 in your class right now. There's 19 what I'll call redshirt freshmen next year, and then after that you have 14 sophomores, and then junior class. This is where it gets a little weird because, as you said, there's 19 of them. You got Deacon Hill, Caleb Johnson, Seth Anderson, Addison Ostrenga, Bo Stevens, Jennings Dunker, Mike Maslinski, Griffin Little, Aaron Graves, Max Llewellyn, Jeremiah Pittman, Jeff Bowie, Jaden Harrell, Carson Shire, Zach Tweet, Xavier Wampa, TJ Hall, Devin Hilson, and Drew Stevens. And then the seniors right now, I guess it would be 13, counting Nick DeYoung, and that's McNamara, LaShawn Williams, Lachey, Nick DeYoung, Mason Richmond, Tyler Ellsbury, Connor Colby, Logan Jones, Deontay Craig, Ethan Herkett, Y.A. Black, Cooper DeJean, and Luke Elkin. So I have them at 86, but again, the 60-year guys are kind of fascinating because, as we said, there are 3 defensive backs, and they are, Castro, Schulte, Harris. You've got the linebackers, which you got Jay Higgins, who's probably the biggest decision of them all individually. Nick Jackson can get a waiver, and they are considering that right now because
is it a done? I mean, what did he get it, or does he have to apply? It has to be granted, right?
It has to be granted. And
see, now I'm wondering about, okay, he applies. Now we're waiting on the NCAA, and then the deadline's coming for the N. That's a headache too. Hopefully they do the
Yeah,
right thing, but how
yeah,
many times have we said that?
right. And Kyler Fisher,
Yes.
and he's been wanting to come back. I don't know if that's, if that's contingent on other ones or if that's, hey, we'll welcome you back no matter what. I mean, in some ways, if Jackson and Higgins decide to leave for the NFL, then I think I would welcome him back. If they decide to come back, then you hate to be cutthroat, but it is a business too. Nick DeYoung is, of course, as we said. Dejon Parker, I can't imagine him coming back. I mean, the numbers are the numbers, and if you can't get past second team, and
Yeah.
it's kind of hard. And then Eric All is another one that, when he initially came here, he was one. He said it was a 1-year deal. He does have a child in Michigan, but getting an ACL in October is not, it's not advantageous for you to go to the next level at all. I mean, you're stuck because in his case, will he be an NFL draft pick? Probably not, because that's unfortunate and sad, but maybe he's a late rounder or something. But, that, and plus, what would he have been if he had been healthy? Probably a mid rounder, fourth, fifth round is my guess. So that one is, I've heard less about. I haven't had a chance to talk to Eric. And I haven't had a lot of background discussion about Eric. So, but either way, any of those players would be helpful for next year. And then it takes away spots. So let me ask you this, Rob. If let's say that they hit a home run, they're at 86 scholarships the way I got it. Let's say that they get all three defensive backs. They keep Cooper. They get their. I'm shooting the moon here. I'm going all the way to the top. Jackson and Higgins are coming back. At least one of the tight ends. Let's say Lachey comes back, and so that would put him at what 92 scholarships. Where do you approach the portal then for this team at this point? I mean, because you feel like defensively you're set. You're not touching anything. Offensively, let's face it, they were the worst offense in the country this year. You're bringing back everybody on the offensive line, but you're, and you're hopefully your quarterback and your tight end switch some things up, but you're still not in great shape. Where do you think they need more? Are they good and just see what happens, or what are you thinking here?
This is just a really tough spot to be in because you're waiting on mostly defensive guys as seniors to make a decision. And I'm not, if you can keep the defense intact, you do it because then you just try to do whatever you can on offense, which is kind of the approach the last 3 years. But I mean, you have to retain the guys that can help you. And that's why I have no problem what they're doing if they're trying to keep most of those guys in the fold. But I think it's painfully obvious that they need help at receiver. So do you run guys off? I mean, that's really your only option, right? Or unless they leave on their own, unless they figure out, hey, I'm not going to get playing time. I mean, it's a very slippery slope. You don't want to be one of those programs that gets known for running guys off because that's negative and it gets used against you. But Scott, I don't know how they go into next season without addressing receiver.
Yeah, I'm there with you. And let's say that they, I mean, Cade is obviously coming back, but let's say one of the tight ends come back and let's just address that side of the ball. Based on what we see here, I don't think they'll change much on the offensive line. I mean, they've got everybody returning. They feel pretty good about it. Now, I would say that they made a lot of strides.
Rusty's gone, right? Rusty's gone.
Yeah, my bad. Rusty's gone. But bringing back Nick DeYoung and guys like that it's but they've got some players now that you're looking at, and we don't really need to mention them, but y'all know who they are. They've had an injury history, and those seem to get targeted for medical as we'll keep you on scholarship at the school, but your football career is over here. And I would say in that going into their junior year, I could see 3 right away that have had injury histories that haven't really moved into that depth chart area. and then there's a couple others that are in that same kind of group, all of them in that going from sophomore to junior year. And that's kind of the crossroads to your career. There's probably a good 5 that I could look at and say, yeah, you're probably targeted for something, and that could be medical. That could be, look at the depth chart and you're not on it. Let's let you come to this decision and we'll help you get somewhere, because they've been pretty good about that. And actually their attrition right now is at or near the lowest in the Big Ten. So if somebody who hasn't seen any action and they're going into their 4th year gets run off, they're not going to look that bad. But you're going to have to be a little bit cutthroat, because if players have all this power right now to move and at any time, teams have to have an opportunity to recalibrate as well. So I could see, like I said, at least 5 in that area of, you might be, if you want to play football, it might not be for the Hawkeyes anymore.
Yeah, and like you said, it's not ideal, but players are getting more freedom now. There's NIL, there's a lot more movement. If you're moving and other student athletes are moving, you have to give the program some leeway too, to say, hey, this isn't working out. We don't see a future for you here.
Mm-hmm.
You got to be blatantly honest with guys and just say, you've been here 3 or 4 years and you haven't moved up the depth chart. What would you think about maybe going down a level or finding we'll help you? I mean, there's ways to do this where it's not just, being shitty to the guys that you said, come join us, you recruited to your program, but there's also the reality of, can you play at this level?
Right. Because, they have good connections at other places. They have, it doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure out that there's a relative that coaches at South Dakota, and Steve Ferentz, and if you're
Miles Taylor's there too.
Miles Taylor, absolutely. And if there's a defensive back that's, just looking to get on the field, type of thing. And, or likewise, anybody, that's
Tim Polasek at North Dakota State too now.
Yeah. Right. And you got Northern Iowa within your state borders. Yep. You've got a lot of MAC schools that are nearby that you frequent. There's a ton of Valley teams, and they know everybody. They've gotten to know people over the years, and that's kind of what it's all about. That as much as they get crapped on at that level, they also have opportunities to take players that will help them that just aren't, and maybe a couple of these guys, maybe it's just injuries. Maybe it's just, damn it, I keep getting hurt and I just can't progress because of that. And then I get lapped, and then it's like, well, I just need an opportunity to play, because somebody's ahead of me now. It's going to be another year before I get a chance to play. And then by then I'm looking at my 5th year, maybe I get another opportunity, but so sometimes it's like, all right, I'll go ahead and take the Northern Illinois spot just so I get on the field. And then maybe at the end you're like, second team all conference, and you get a chance at the NFL, where otherwise at Iowa, maybe you get a spot start when you're a senior, and that's about it.
Yeah, and I think we've talked about this before. The guys that are at practice every day, the guys that are competing every day, they know where they stand. They know which guys are better. Some of them can get a little clouded, maybe with people in their ears and things like that. But you look at Iowa recruits a bunch of defensive backs, and then Quinn Schulte walks on and ends up winning that spot. That changes the dynamic of that position, because now maybe a scholarship guy that thought he was going to play is now passed by a walk-on. That changes things. So just because how things look with the beginning, when you get here, or you're like, okay, I'm going to sign with Iowa, I'm a part of this class, this is what the depth chart looks like ahead of me. That is going to change. It always changes. So you have to change. You have to adjust. And, we see it at all different positions as well. Nick DeYoung's a guy who, ended up passing guys that came in on scholarship. It's the way it goes. And I think they're going to be, I don't think you can avoid hurting feelings, Scott, at some points when this is going on, but it's reality. And with a transfer portal and the ability for players to make money and move, that this is also what comes with it. Sometimes you're going to be told, it's not working for you here.
Exactly. And it sucks, but it's a business too. Yeah. And when you have business decisions, are you going to really keep somebody who's hanging around and not Jay Higgins? You got to win games. As we saw, you can still win 10 games and get your offensive coordinator fired. So that's where it all comes down to. And this coaching staff, if there's anything about them that you respect, it's that they are brutally honest. They're always honest. They've never sugarcoated anything, and they've never bullshitted anybody. What they try to say is, look, this is where we see you fitting in. You have the opportunity to compete. That, as you said, most of the players know. The only ones who really don't feel that way a lot of times are the skill position players, because that's a little bit, it's more subjective in your evaluation. Who can run the best routes, who can throw the best ball, who has leadership responsibilities and who doesn't, that type of thing. That's where it gets a little dicey. But when you're talking about an offensive lineman, if somebody is better than you, because they're physically better than you, and they're, and maybe, once in a while, maybe you have that conversation. Well, I think I'm better. Well, no, you're not. And they tell you that, and they coach you hard. And so, and every time that somebody comes in, Rob, we know this too, that they tell them, hey, next year we're going to try to recruit somebody better than you. And when you look at like the line, take a look at the linebacker situation currently. The three guys coming in are all elite players. They're all gonna play at some point. Maybe not next year when maybe one or two gets on the field for special teams, but Cam Buffington, if he was at Dowling or City or Kennedy or something like that, and if he decided, I want to open up my recruitment. I mean, this year Oklahoma came after him, and it's like, well, how committed are you? Well, I'm committed. Shut up. Go home. That type of thing. Derek Weisskopf, USC. Hey, we're just wanting to know, are you really committed to Iowa or not? Or you want to take a trip to LA? No. Get out of here. And Preston Reese, who is a doppelganger for Josie Jewell, and his attitude and mindset and toughness, and same type of thing. But you look at those three plus Ben Keeter, and if you're in that sophomore junior group, you better make your freaking strides right now, and you better make them in the spring, because otherwise you're going to get beat. And then, then you're just taking up spots. So that's what everybody's got to evaluate. I mean, Jalen Watson to me, I don't know, maybe I'm segueing too quickly here, but
let's cruise into the class that signed yesterday.
Yeah.
This is a good time to do that. Good segue.
Yeah. I mean, Jalen Watson, is to me, one of the two most underrated players in this class. As a wide receiver, he was unguardable in Ohio. Now he's flipping over to the other side, and they think those skills will translate even better to defense. Would it be a surprise to you if by the end of training camp next year he's the second team corner? Wouldn't surprise me.
No, not at all.
So that's where, if you're in that glut, the midsection, it's like, are you plateauing or are you grinding and getting better? And they know, and they have to know, and the team has to know, because if you're, again, going into your junior year and you're just not quite getting to the depth chart, but Deshaun Lee is, and John Nestor is, and the Jalen Watson's going to get there and stuff, then it's time to, okay, I'm at a crossroads in my career.
And you got TJ Hall coming back too, and he's got had time. But yeah, and again, this stuff is so fluid, and development is not linear, Scott. And we see that with guys that emerge later in their career. So you have to be cautious of that too. As a guy, his development may be a little slower early on, but does he catch fire like a Michael Ojemudia
Yeah.
or, Fletcher or somebody like that? I'm talking about defensive backs that end up getting better as their careers go on. You don't know that, but I think it's harder now to wait on guys because of the immediacy and the transfer portal and guys coming to college as recruits more ready to play right away from the development that they get in high school from a physical standpoint. A lot of high schools have their own strength and conditioning programs. It's a lot different than when you and I were in high school. Obviously, when they used to, the horse and buggy, we used to go to get to school in the horse and buggy.
But I used to have a 45-minute cassette of "We Will Rock You," and I played on my Walkman in the locker room with these big fuzzy earphones and stuff. It's a little different now. Well, I think when it comes to waiting and being patient, I think you could do that more on the line of scrimmage than you can in the other places.
I would agree.
Because, it's still about physical development and power and strength. And, and there always seems to be one or two linemen that, whether it's injuries or it's something, kind of delays them. They get kind of in that zone of, where am I at? And then all of a sudden you get Logan Lee, who was for a couple of years just kind of always hurt, always struggling, and then finally, bam, becomes a incredible contributor for a couple of years. And
how about Castro?
Yeah, right.
He waited his time,
and but he got to second team at least. And
we were hearing about him.
Yeah,
but he couldn't get through because the guys ahead of him are all now in the NFL.
Right. And but offensive linemen, there's a couple that it's one thing to be kind of that super sub, maybe one of the top 7 versus being number 11. If you're number 11, then it's like, I got to reevaluate where I'm at, because if I can't, maybe I crack the depth chart, but I've only seen action on field goal and 2 blowouts. Is that really worth your football career? And for some players, and we celebrate them too, they decide that, sticking around here, this is the team I've chosen. I really enjoy where I'm at, enjoy my teammates. I'm getting a great degree from an awesome university. I'm just going to go ahead and write it out. A Devontae Young stands out for that. Some players flip positions, went to the other side, Henry Marquez, and they become valuable contributors too. Don't get me wrong. But when you're in a scholarship crunch like this, then that's where it becomes a little bit more tight-fisted and tight, I don't want to use Sophie's choice or anything. It's not that severe, but but there are some decisions to make, business decisions.
Yes, no doubt. And obviously this 24 class will come in, a couple receivers in that group, KJ Parker, Reese Vanderzee from Central Lyon, George Little Rock. So, and I think there's going to be 7 running backs on scholarship next year. Do I have that right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
That's a lot of guys at one position, man.
Yeah. That's one where I'm not going to predict anybody, but I think it wouldn't shock me if they come back from the bowl and one decides that they want to take a look around, because, as you said, they like both guys coming in. One's an in-state guy. The other fits what they want. Brevendal's in-state Iowa guy all the way around. Very, very fast. Xavier Williams is big and thick and physical, and then you look at kind of the top, and you got LaShawn Williams, who's really emerged as kind of their go-to back. I mean, very reliable, and then you've got, I think, 4 very talented running backs in the middle. The true freshman played well, I thought, last year, and then, when they had to, and then I thought Patterson and Johnson have a lot of potential too. But it would not surprise me. In fact, it would surprise me more if they're here by June, if all 7 are here, versus if 1 or 2 takes off. I think I would expect that more so.
Yeah, and I also think, and we talked about this earlier this year, I think there are some versatile guys in that group that you can use in other ways, getting multiple on the field at the same time. But that's a discussion for another day. I felt somewhat, what's the word I'm looking for? I felt like I felt seen, as the kids say, I think I wrote Monday or Tuesday. My lead to my recruiting roundup was that Iowa did better in state. I wasn't breaking any news, but I think that was a focus after the 23 class where there were guys that Iowa was targeting that ended up going to Iowa State. And we've talked about this, and I've written about this, and I know you've written about this. It's different now at Iowa State with Matt Campbell than it was with Paul Rhodes. Matt Campbell is not shying away. He's going to go after the top in-state guys just like Iowa does, whereas Paul Rhodes would kind of shy away and defer. And last year, Iowa State did well. They got guys that Iowa wanted. This year, it was the opposite. It was somewhat of a flip of that. There were most of the guys that at least waited to commit. You talked about like Buffington and those guys, and even those guys had Iowa State offers early. And Iowa did well, keeping the in-state guys together. Now we can go with the rankings, top 7 of 8, whatever. That's subjective to me. To me, it's more Iowa and Iowa State both wanted these guys, and Iowa got most of those guys. That means more to me than the rankings.
Sure. I mean, the rankings are, let's take Cody Fox at the very, very top. If he didn't commit after his freshman year, if he would have waited till a year ago to commit, he would have been the number 1 guy in the class in the state of Iowa. No question. But he committed so early and he's out of sight, out of mind. And it's just an small town Iowa kid. Whereas you look at Grant Bricks and, he's visiting here, he's visiting there, and everybody wants him there and blah, 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 blah. And then doesn't commit until after Thanksgiving. His stock rises because it's interesting. That's the way it works in a lot of these situations. But I think in state, as you said, there wasn't a David Kolker situation where they flipped from Iowa to Iowa State. There wasn't, Kai Black and Jamo Patton. The Des Moines market was where Iowa State really hit hard last year. And Caden Proctor is a different situation altogether. But I think, I talked to Tyler kind of on the side yesterday for a little while, and Tyler Barnes. And one of the things that they're tweaking in this process in state is that they are targeting that they're going to be more willing to offer in-state guys earlier, that there's no more waiting around. Let's see how they do. Let's kind of slow play them. And no, that they're not going to do that anymore, because they know they respect Iowa State enough. And frankly, you got to respect Nebraska because they're targeting them too. That, hey, if we wait, if Iowa State offers a kid when he's a freshman track athlete, then we better be right there. Otherwise, they're going to build up this 6 months worth of visits and hey, we love you. We've offered you. They haven't. We love you, not them. And next thing you know, you lose that guy. And then, in the Cyhawk game in 2029, that they intercept that pass to end the game, so it how it works. When you got a close game like this year, Ethan Hurkett, what if he doesn't play for Iowa? Maybe they get that 4th down. Maybe they go down and they score. So it's really narrow, and you've got to be careful about that. And so I think what you're going to see are if there's some sophomores that look like they're going to be guys, they're going to offer them. They're just not going to wait. And that's a little bit dangerous, but it's also what you have to do, because Iowa State's not Paul Rhodes anymore. It's not, he likes Iowa. He grew up an Iowa fan. We're just going to ignore him. No, they're going to target him. They don't care.
Yeah. It's early evaluation is key. And it speaks to what we were talking about earlier with roster management. You have to be able to identify guys earlier, because everybody is doing it. Everybody is getting out there, and there are these camps that you can bring kids into in the summer and get a better look at them. And Iowa's done that with some of these guys. The guys that are in this class camped at Iowa at a younger age. And you look at this 24 class, and Scott spoke to it, Cody Fox and Cam Buffington committed in the summer of 2021. That's crazy. And then you had Weiskopf the April after that. Weiskopf, I'm not sure how he says it. Yeah. Is it Weiskopf or Weiskopf?
Weiskopf. I think it's Weiskopf. Yeah.
Weiskopf? Okay. Yeah. And then Preston Reese was close after that. And then Drew Campbell came in, Brevin Dahl, Reese Vandersea. They are all before the season. Those guys are all, and the guys that I have, Weiskopf, Dahl, Campbell, Reese, and Vandersea all reported Iowa State offers.
Yeah.
All of them.
And kind of one of my favorite recent features I wrote was one today on what I call the core four. And those were the four that all committed to Iowa more than 18 months before signing day. And, and they all were targeted by Iowa State. Now, Buffington said that, I think it was Buffington, that he went there. They said, we're going to recruit you. They didn't officially offer him, but he was also so early, and he was like, I was getting ready to go to it. But once Iowa heard about it, and he was getting ready to go to a camp in Missouri just to, see. And then Iowa was like, why don't you come to our camp instead? And then all of a sudden they give him an offer. And he's like, well, it's 45 minutes away. I grew up an Iowa fan. He's got pictures of him as a youth, and it was an easy call. And in fact, for him and for Reese, they were all both like, and Fox too, it was like they had to contain themselves to keep from committing right on the spot.
His brother walked on here too at the time. It's Taylor, right?
Taylor Fox. Yeah.
And he was done last year. Was his last year. So they had that connection as well.
Right. And he was a player at that time and everything. And so you have those connections. Weiskopf was a little bit different in that he, he'd had Wisconsin offer, and he went to Wisconsin and camped. Iowa was heavy on him. It was really between those two. Iowa State and Nebraska jumped in, and he visited both, but he just didn't want to mess around. And then even though all these teams with Fox, he's getting Notre Dame and Ole Miss are coming after him. And he's just like, hey, don't you want to go to a Notre Dame game for, he's like, no, I'd rather go to Iowa. So, these guys are just salt of the earth. And, but what's interesting to me is when you look at the roster management, those three linebackers, Buffington, Weiskopf, and Reese, one at basically two spots, you're grabbing three guys that are all pretty high level guys. That's unusual. And if one of them was across the way, across the river, or into Wisconsin or Northern Illinois, even, they would have, it's hard to say if they would have gotten it, but they're so close. Would you really want to have to play against one of them at Iowa State, or Wisconsin, so they'll take them, they'll figure out which seat on the bus they're on and move from there.
It also helps, as you said, that they were in our part of the state. I think people don't see the separation sometimes, or the division. I don't want to use that word. There's the Eastern Iowa, and then there's the Central Iowa, and then there's the Western Iowa. And those are all, I think Iowa sometimes has a better chance to recruit on the other side of the Mississippi, Western Illinois, than they do Western Iowa sometimes, just based on the fandoms there and just the distance and how these kids are brought up. You look at even the guys in the 25 class at Algona. You know what I mean? With Alex Mansky and Jack Limbaugh. And Limbaugh is obviously a legacy for Nebraska, so that changes things. But I'm not sure Grant Bricks ever really gave Iowa that much of a chance. And that's fine. That's the way it goes. But it's different than it used to be when Iowa was, controlled the whole state. It's much, and Missouri's coming in more now. Kansas State is coming in more now. Kansas State. I mean, Iowa's got a lot more competition within its borders, maybe, than it's ever had.
No question. And as you said, there's really the state is so diverse when it comes to that part of things, where if you're in Iowa, if you're in the 319 area code, and was it 563 is the other one, because I keep getting messing up when they split from 3 to 5. When you're in this area, kind of east of east of 35, kind of Grinnell to east, Iowa is the dominant program. And for Iowa State to even get there, they're going to have an in or or just something that's a little different. And as you said, it's not that far to Illinois. I mean, we're very provincial in Iowa, and whether it's news media or the fans, I mean, more people in Cedar Rapids get more interested in something that might happen in Mason City that may happen in Rock Island, even though it's so much closer. But if you go over to Orion, like for Logan Lee or Rock Island or in Lena or any of those towns in Prophetstown or whatever, that's a lot like Iowa. It's close. It's an hour and a half away. It's, what's the college there? Not really anybody. Illinois, yeah, but that's still kind of far. And it's not really Illinois is not the dominant force that Iowa is in Iowa. And Northwestern, well, that's Chicago and that's secluded. And Wisconsin, yeah, you got some power there, but it's still, it's fertile ground. And that's why they've done really well in rural Illinois. In fact, Tyler told me yesterday, we consider that our home territory because it's actually closer to the suburbs than it is to like Sioux City, so why not go in that area and claim it as your own, so I think it makes perfect sense.
Yes. And, recruiting is always so fluid. It depends on, who's on your staff, what connections they have. We've seen Iowa dip back. Iowa when Greg Davis came, they kind of went into Texas and away from Florida from when Ken O'Keefe and then the Northeast. And then Ken O'Keefe comes back. They're back in the Northeast. Mm-hmm. Now you got Liddell Betts and they're doing Florida again. It's just, and that's Iowa recruiting is built on networking and connections often. It's often guys that are familiar. And that's a good thing because when you go all the way back to there not being a lot of attrition, that happens on the front end with identification, evaluation of the guys that they're recruiting, including this 24 class, which I like. I think it's a good class. I think it addresses some needs. I'm still standing firm that they need to add receivers from the portal. Yeah. At least one, if not two. You lose Deontay Vines and Nico Ragaini. Those guys were rotational pieces this year. You have to supplement that. Hopefully the three guys that were in last year's class, Scott, and then Jacob Bostic, there are some guys there that could emerge. I really like Reese Vanderzee. I don't know if he can play as a true freshman, but kid is super athletic. And KJ Parker's an interesting guy too.
Well, exactly. And I think you look at the wide receivers right now. I mean, Caleb Brown emerged kind of late as a decent player. Seth Anderson, I think, was underutilized, probably the most underutilized player. And that's maybe not necessarily his fault. It's what happened with quarterback. But they're going to need, out of that, there's four receivers that are tall that got an opportunity to maybe be an X or play X snaps. And, Bowie, Howard, Bostic, Vanderzee, I think all of them have that chance to be there. But, what is Alex Moda? Is he a Z? Yeah, probably. But can he play? Well, we don't know. KJ Parker is an interesting piece, but, you hate projecting freshmen because they just don't. They never seem to pan out.
I think the thing we don't know is, are any of these guys ready to come in next season, game one, and be able to contribute along with Caleb Brown and Seth Anderson?
I don't know, and then I'd throw in, somebody like Alec Wick. Can he be somebody like Nico Ragaini? Can he be, they've had good luck relatively with I can't even talk today. With walk-on types or JUCO, Nick Easley, Nico Ragaini, somebody could be a possession receiver. Could he come in and be a rotational guy and catch 15 passes in a year? But I agree with you. They need a wide receiver, and it's probably, to me, is what you try to do is try to get somebody at a group of five level that maybe doesn't feel the need to have to catch 100 passes, that maybe wants to take a step up in competition. And you could say, they could go, oh, Iowa's offense, but you could also say, hey, you can turn us around too.
Yeah.
We have no problem, and find somebody. I mean, this is easy to say, like a Charlie Jones.
I mean, I like what they did with Seth Anderson and Caleb Brown last year. Those were the two guys they brought in, and it wasn't just a 1-year thing.
Yeah.
Those are guys that are now in the system that you can develop. And they already came with some pedigree and some background. So just do that again. Do some more of that. But again, we're not at practice. Maybe the guys that came in this year are kicking ass this bowl. This is the time of year, for fans that don't know, where a lot of these young guys get evaluated during these bowl practices. Maybe some of these guys are beginning to emerge now that they have this a season under their belt.
Right, because the players that go to the scout team, I don't think people know this, and maybe it's something I need to write about just to make sure they do. And that is, if you're on the scout team, you're not coached by the offense.
Right.
Maybe you're in drills and that's it. You go down to the defense and the GAs kind of coach you, hey, you're running Tennessee's up-tempo offense the next week or so. And I don't even know who would be the quarterback to try to beat Joe Milton. I don't think they have one that can even compare. I mean, so maybe Rezar if he's there for a day or two, but Kamari Moulton, just don't throw it. But when you're looking at those guys, a Bowie or a Howard or a Moda, and I don't know if Bowie's up or not, but they don't really have. They're just running routes based off the other team against the first team defense and second team defense. They just don't have, opportunities to even show themselves in practice. So now during bowl prep, 15 practices, they're running Iowa for 10 of them, so they're getting a chance to compete, and some of the players that have been banged up, get a chance to relax and stay off their feet a little bit and not hit. So they get that opportunity to showcase themselves. And I do think that Iowa needs one of, Vanderzee's still so young that you can't really just say, oh yeah, he's going to come in and play right away. If he does, that's great.
And he also played quarterback this year because they needed him to.
Exactly. And, it's hard to pinpoint anything there anyway. And I'd say Bowie, Howard, or Bostic, one of the three needs to step up, be an X, probably take Vines' snaps in the bowl game and move forward. And the good thing is, I mean, it really didn't matter anyway, but the bowl game's exempt from the 4 games. So, if I think Bowie may have played in a couple. But
yeah, he was at least in more than one. I lost track of how many, but I don't think any of those guys played 4.
Yeah. So, so it doesn't matter anyway, but they can come in and play and not have them affect whether there be a redshirt freshman or not. And they probably should. They need to, in fact.
Yeah, no doubt. What are we, about 45 minutes in? Probably a good time to take a break here, and then we'll dive back in for a little bit and see what we can get to. But support for this podcast comes from Systems Unlimited, celebrating 50 years of providing services to people living with disabilities and mental health needs throughout East Central Iowa. A list of their services and upcoming events can be found at sui.org. That is sui.org. Thank you to Systems Unlimited for the support of the podcast, and more importantly, the great work that they do in our community. We're going to hear from a few more sponsors now, and then Scott and I will be back on the other side of this break. And we are back. Thanks again to our sponsors. We appreciate them one and all. I don't think we need to spend a ton of time on this, Scott, but I know it's an important topic for everybody. I just don't think we have much of an update on the offensive coordinator position. Some confusion this week from what Kirk said, and he clarified it yesterday. He may have interviewed people, he may not have. I think uh, he has a he has a pretty good lay of the land and knows kind of what he wants to do. He just doesn't want to share it with anybody, so that's fine. And it's not surprising that they're waiting till after the bowl game to name the coordinator. None of this is surprising, and him saying that he wants somebody that buys into complimentary football, I know struck a nerve with people, but I don't know why it still does. Are we still doing this?
There, there's reality, and then there's wishful thinking. And you've got to understand where reality is. As long as Kirk Ferentz is here, he's going to adhere to this philosophy. That doesn't mean he's going to adhere to certain play calling or, the scheme part of it, but the philosophy is not going to change. They're a ground acquisition offense. They believe in running the football. They believe in that yin and yang between offense, defense, and then add the special teams element to it.
Is there a more important statistic to him than turnover margin?
No, that is number one. Other than final score, that's number one.
And offense plays into that, right?
Yeah. And this year right. And this year was not a good year for that. No. They're at like -3, and that's in part somewhat to defense not taking the ball away, but it's also in not taking care of the ball. But when you're losing quality players that you expect, it's going to happen. And I think, overall that when you look at what he's wanting to do and kind of shooting it out there is he wants people to understand that he's not going to go to the run and shoot, which he told, that's why I wanted to ask him the other day was when you get somebody in here, what is your foundation or, whatever. And that's when he really hammered it, complimentary football is what we're going to do. I think overall, when you start to talk about complimentary football and then you add in elements of passing and stuff, he doesn't want to go 4 and 5 wide every play. They did a lot of that. People don't understand, but they did a lot. But it's going to be about running the football. It's going to be about slowing the pace of the game down. And then it's going to be about executing. And if you don't, you punt and let your defense live, but not putting your defense in a bad position. And that's what we've seen with a lot of air raid offenses. They put their defenses in really bad positions, 3 and out. Well, and then you look at this team and you go, well, they did too, just in a different way. They just had a great defense, but they had 210 more snaps this year than Penn State, and they were second in the country in yards per play allowed. Isn't that unreal to me? That just blows my mind that they had 3.99 yards per play. I think that'll go up a little bit in the bowl game, but 3.99 yards per game. And they had 800 snaps on defense. It was just remarkable to me.
Yeah. So, which makes what I was saying earlier about the seniors they want to come back. It's you want to keep that phase as sound as possible while improving. You obviously lose a major weapon in Tory Taylor and maybe Reese. Is it Dakin?
Dakin, I think.
Dakin, yeah. I don't know. I'm going to have to work on pronunciations, but you hope that he can at least. There's not a huge drop off from Tory, but you got to expect something, right? If Cooper goes to the NFL. Weechin is a nice return guy. He's not Cooper DeJean. He's also not on defense. So Cooper is, he's helping 2 phases. But the idea here is it's not just about improving the offense. You want to improve the offense, but you want to make sure those other phases are as good as they've been, if not better.
Yeah, no question. And so and that's why I think that, why he just basically told everybody we're not going to change our philosophy. Somebody wants to come in and it's like the house is going to remain a split level foyer, but if you want to paint the room green, go ahead. It's just we're not going to tear it down and build a ranch. So that's kind of where this is at, and so for some fans who don't quite understand that, it's not a matter of, they want the hot young candidate who comes in and maybe they were in the MAC or the Sun Belt and, they average 34 points a game and 420 yards and, but it's like, what you smoking? You're not coming here to do that. You're going to have to play within the style that we want to play. And so that's why I think, there have been reports that, whether it's Joe Philbin or Scott Frost, which was laughable, and other things. I couldn't even get my mind around that one. But, it could be Joe Philbin. It could be Paul Chryst. It's going to be somebody like that philosophically that works their way in. And whether they call a game, adjust the pass routes, the concepts, that's fine. But they're not going to be 80-20 pass to run ratio. It's just not going to happen.
No, they need somebody that can fix the passing game is what they need.
Oh yeah.
So it can. So there's complementary football on offense.
Yeah.
Like the passing game complements the running game because it's not doing that right now.
Yeah. Right. Well, it's weird, Rob. You look back at certain, aspects of the Brian Ferentz era, and the last 3 years have been a disaster. Let's face it, on offense.
Yep.
And there were reasons for that. There were oopses for that, but then ultimately it's their fault. When things don't work out. I mean, injuries at quarterback this year. After, you think about it, from basically Stanzi's injury until Petrus's injury, there was really no change up whatsoever. They had, I think, one start out, and that was Jake Rudock, and Beathard came in for him at, what was it, Purdue or something in 14. But even then, when you have Nate Stanley, he was productive as a quarterback, 68 touchdowns. You had good tight ends. And then in 2020, even though Stanley was gone, they ran the ball really well. But what haven't they had the last couple of years that they'd had back then? Well, a consistently good quarterback and an ass kicker at left tackle that was able to run outside zone behind Alaric Jackson, who I don't know. I guess I would say on another tangent, Alaric Jackson and Christian Kirksey to me were the two most underrated players I've ever covered here. I think they were both just out fucking standing and never really got their due. And I think in the run game in particular, Jackson was a mauler, just absolutely phenomenal. And so, they haven't been able to really do that. And then, receivers have been not well coached. So, there's a lot there.
Yeah, we'll see. We'll have a answer here sooner rather than later. We're getting close to the new year, and I can't imagine we'll go too far into January before we hear about who the new offensive coordinator will be so they can get started and get to work. Last thing on football, Scott, you handed out the Duke Slater Award, our third annual Duke Slater Award. I know people, as they do, bitch and moan and disparage it on social media, but I know the players that have received it have appreciated it. And more importantly, we appreciate what they do for us.
No question. And, the beginnings of this award, Rob, we talked about it even before all the racial situation in 2020. And several of us had talked about how we were going to try to, because we felt it was important. These players, and it's not just football, and I'd be all in if somebody wanted to do basketball or another sport. But, they take their time, their Tuesday, their free time after practice, after their lunch, before their classes, to come and talk to us and answer questions, and after games, and some of it's uncomfortable, some of it's stupid, and they roll their eyes at, or try not to roll their eyes. Maybe I will, but, and sometimes I say stupid stuff too. But they weather it, and they do it in professional fashion. I think that needs to be applauded, because so many times today it's all gotcha, and it's all, there's just not a lot of respect. And over the years, Rob, the majority, if not most, of these players have been nothing but respectful. They've been very good to deal with. They've been fun. They've been engaging. They've also been serious. And they've always, even if there is a dumb question, they haven't shot it back, and they could have. There are a handful of times where I expected them to, but they've never done that. And the first year, Kayvon was just a true treasure to talk to. It was just a lot of fun to talk to. We could have given it to anybody, and there were a lot of votes that year, but he kind of won out, and I thought that was impressive. Last year, Spencer Petras took all the bullets for a bad offense, and he kept standing there and taking them. He took them way too often in some ways, but he was just a stand-up young man. And then this year, Jay Higgins, anytime we needed an answer, he was there. He provided. He was fun. He was entertaining, engaging, but the true leader for this team, I think, a guy that at an important position. Going into this year, that was probably one of my biggest question was, how do they replace Jack Campbell? It's hard to do that. Well, he did it so well that, Jack's great and he's the best that ever does it, but Jay Higgins isn't too bad either. And I don't know. So every single person I know I talked to about this kind of was Jay, and there were others that were like, well, but Joe Evans is really good too, and Nico's fun, but Jay has stood out, no question.
Yeah, there's always more than the one that we give it to, right? There's always a decent amount, and like you said, the vast majority. I can go through my mind of the as long as I've been doing this. There's only been a few that have been a little abrasive, or I want to say combative, but would come back and a lot of times fairly, call us out for a dumb question or a dumb topic or approach or whatever it may be. But for the most part, they're very patient with us and very forthcoming with us and very informative with us and help us do our job so we can tell their stories to you guys.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I've had very little problem, and it's a two-way street. It's respect. We have to show them respect too.
Yep.
And that includes, among the things I would call out our brethren, is sometimes either the questions aren't real good, or they haven't been prepared, or they don't know the subject matter that well, and they're just overly too generic at certain times. But yet they don't, to their credit, they don't break. They don't say, what the hell are you doing? Sometimes when it's about mood in the locker room after a loss, there's part of my mind, because, I played a million years ago, but what the hell do you think it is? But they, to their credit, they stand there. They may be burning up inside, but they don't let that show. And again, kind of going back to when it all started, we wanted to show an appreciation for that, and they've embraced it. They feel like it's an honor, and it really should be, because any of those three, and you could add, multiply it by 5 players, any of them will have outstanding lives beyond the game of football.
No doubt. I wish sometimes fans could get a chance to, not that it's fun to experience, but the post game in Indianapolis where Deacon Hill's crying and Logan Lee's fighting back tears. And I remember that in 2015, and talking to Austin Blythe was crying when they lost the way they lost to Michigan State, and just how invested these guys are in what they're doing for your team, for the team that you root for. I think it would change a lot of people's perspectives.
And that's why I feel the way I do. I know you feel the way you do, that in all of these sports, but football, and because we're talking football, the 6 a.m. workouts in the summer, and it's hot, and they get up at 5 to get there, to get ready to go. And then they're lifting and then conditioning for 3 to 4 hours, and then going to class. And then in the fall, and how many of these guys are going to have surgeries in January? I mean, I don't know. It's usually north of at least 5, if not closer to 12. And they're hurting, and they're doing this every single day, and they're doing it for each other. And they're sore, they're in pain, and yet they're fighting. And in the fashion that they lose, it tears them up. And it's easy for us or anybody else to say this team sucks. Well, try doing it. Try playing
Yeah.
it, putting there. So I guess I feel like every time I write about it or talk to them about it, I do take that into consideration.
So if you wonder sometimes why we get defensive of the players when they're being unfairly criticized,
Yeah.
we have a different lens that we look through, and hopefully people kind of can draw off that and understand and appreciate our relaying of what these guys are like as human beings more than just a guy that runs out there every Saturday with a number and a helmet on.
Yeah.
So, all right, Scott, let's flip the basketball real quick here. We're not going to spend a lot of time on this because we're running out of time, and football is still the main course right now. But little dessert here with men's basketball. You and I were at last night's game against UMBC. Slow start for the Hawks. Nice recovery. Was it end of the first half was like, I don't know, a huge run, 25-7 or something like that.
Yeah.
At the end, it was pretty significant. That may have run into the second half too. But I want to talk about Brock Harding and his kind of impact on last night's game and his potential impact moving forward. Fran has kind of slow played him to this point. I'm of the belief that it's time to let him go. It's time to he played 30 minutes last night. I think he needs to be up there regularly now.
This season it's a parallel to what it was that year that they took the huge dip. We know where this is going. Not to say that they can't rebound and have a nice couple of games here and there. It's going to be really tough for them to get off the canvas and win more than 15 games this year. I really think that if they could win 7 in the Big Ten, that's probably about right. What do you do then? Well, you prepare your team for the future. And it kind of reminds me of when it was Jordan Bohannon versus Christian Williams. And Christian was probably a little more prepared, but Jordan had something to him, an element. He's a great passer and a really good shooter at that point. And it was like, well, it's time to make him the guy. And I think that's where they are right now with Brock Harding. Yeah, is he a little careless? Is he a little flashy times? A little, I would say needs a little more maturity on the court. It's just his game, not his person, but just his game. Yeah, I think so. But you know what? Put him and Freeman on there. They're your future. Get them out there 30 minutes a game. Cricky is another one and Perkins. And then the fifth position, you can do whatever you want with it. And I know some fans have a lot of opinions, but I'll just say, to me, those four, and Sanford probably too. I would probably go with those 5. I think Sanford's indispensable as well. I don't know why I overlooked him, but I would go with Harding, Sanford, Perkins, Cricky, and Freeman, and roll with that, and bring everybody else off the bench at different points.
Yeah, I like the youthful exuberance of Freeman and Harding. And I think at times this year, this team has lacked that energy. Mm-hmm. Those two guys really have a lot of energy. So in addition to their being able to help you from a basketball standpoint, I think they kind of bring that energy and juice that you need at this level to stay at a high level. But yeah, I think this team, it's going to be interesting to see how it develops as this season goes on, because I think there's a lot of feeling out still. But I don't think this is a great Big Ten. I'm not breaking any news there. I think the league is down. So if this team can continue to develop, I think they got a chance. I'm not saying they're winning the Big Ten, but they got a chance to maybe get some victories in the Big Ten that you can build on, Scott, as part of that rebuilding process.
Yeah, but it's going to take time, and it's going to have to be gradual, and it's not going to be easy for them. I mean, we saw, the Michigan game told me a lot about this team, that it's got a long way to go. But that doesn't mean it can't win these games either. There are games they're going to win a couple of games. You're like, wow, how'd they pull that one out? And then they're going to lose a couple that you're like, God, what is going on there? That happens in basketball season anyway, but it's going to really happen this year where you're going to go somewhere and you're going to be like, how did they lose by 40? And it's going to happen. And then there's going to be a couple where, you look at, let's just throw, it's not Purdue, anything south of Purdue, but, Ohio State on Groundhog Day. At home, well, wow, they won. How did that happen? And then they go to Minnesota, and you're like, what?
It could be one of those seasons, definitely.
Yeah. So I would expect them they're going to have their growing pains, but what you do when you have your growing pains is you go young and experience it and get the heart, the bumps out of the way. So that's how I would form my five. I think that's the best way. I think that's the best energy lineup. Rob, are you in agreement with me, or do you think there needs to be something different?
Yeah, I'm still of the not always who should start, but more of the minutes guy. I'm more how many minutes are guys getting, rather than who starts. And I know you're not saying that, this is they have to.
Oh yeah,
but it's. I think if I'm Fran, I'm riding the hot hand on a given night. And, is this person sideways, for lack of a better term, on a given night?
Yeah.
And am I getting more from, is Brock Harding struggling on a given night?
Yeah.
Is DeSante Bowen, is he better on a given night? Is Josh Dix better on a given night than somebody else? So I just think for Fran and his staff, it's going to take. This is a really important year just coaching and trying to push the right buttons, because you're going to need to do that if you want to pull out some of these wins. So I'm not locked into a given starting lineup. I think it's fluid, and you just kind of go as the season goes and see how guys improve. There are guys that, you don't know, Laje missed last night's game, DeBelle. Maybe he comes in and a given night he's better, or Price Sanford or whatever. So I think there are pieces here, talented pieces. It's just a matter of putting together on a given night.
Yeah. Oh, no question. I mean, basketball is different where somebody has the hot hand, somebody's coming in off the bench and they're hitting three. And Fran's always been good about that to some extent, where if he's got a lineup that's clicking in the second half, they usually sticks with him, and then maybe there's a foul or a couple of misses or they need to change something, and he'll do it. But by and large, it's not always, and oftentimes it's rarely the one that starts the game. It's just, I guess what I'm looking at is who are the five players at the kind of spreading the positions out that kind of, I think, can impact the game positively the most, and then put them in those positions. And to me, it's, it's definitely Harding. I think he's your future at that position. I think he's going to be a crowd pleaser, in a lot of ways. And then, I think Perkins is still your rock, and really good guy. And Sanford is your guy that if he's hot, you ride that all the way. And then, Cricky, you brought him in. He's your leading scorer. You can't, he's the most solid of the players, the most dependable one. And then Freeman is like Harding, except you want that. You want him to go face Zach Edey and some of these players here, because in a year he's going to be able to turn it around, and he's even competing now, and he has that bravado that only youth can provide, and I think you got to ride it. So, and I'm not saying that Patrick McCaffrey or Josh Dix or DeBelle or Price Sanford, whoever shouldn't get a chance to get in there, but I think those are the ones that I would kind of ride with to start with anyway.
You talked about Freeman, his fourth freshman of the week for the Big Ten this week, which is a new program record, which is impressive. And I'll use that to segue to the young lady who wears number 22 in the same arena, who won her 22nd Big Ten Player of the Week award this week, one behind the all-time leader, who also wore black and gold at 23, is Megan Gustafson. So I'm going to go out on a limb and say that Caitlin gets that record too, without much difficulty. And the women are in action again tonight. Oh, I guess, do you consider 5 o'clock night or late afternoon? Whatever you consider it, it is tonight at 5. They play Loyola of Chicago at home. I like how this team has kind of bounced back from that loss, Scott. It seems to have almost galvanized it a little bit. We're seeing Sharon Goodman start to pick up a little bit, and everybody kind of settle in the rotation. You lose Monica Sonano and help me out, the wing player that they lost,
McKenna Warnock.
McKenna Warnock. That was a lot to replace, but I think they've kind of figured that out, and I like the rotation. I like how they're playing. Not a bad Cleveland State team they played Saturday in Des Moines, and it was just kind of a systematic dismantling as that game went on. And that's kind of what this Iowa women's team is doing. It's just kind of steadily as a game goes on, they just gain control, and eventually you look up and they're up 25.
Yeah, right. I know, you kind of get surprised almost. You're like, here's the thing: you almost expect them to score on every single possession. They're so prolific. And so if they go 2 possessions without scoring, it's like, oh, what's going on? And, next thing you know, it's the TV timeout at the midpoint. You look up, they're up 18. Oh, wow. I didn't really realize that. But, and that's kind of where this team is. It's a high pro level team, and but it's all really about maintaining, because the Big Ten's coming. And it's going to be, they're going to lose some games, but I like the way that they've bounced back from that Kansas State game at Carver, because they did not play well. And that to me was like the wake up bell, or whatever you want to say, that they needed. The alarm set that this is what could happen if we don't play well. If Caitlin doesn't shoot well and we don't have players scoring, you can't just beat Caitlin and that's it. Teams will beat you. Good teams will beat you. So, with that, it's been, they've been better. And, I think Hannah Stolke adds something, that when she's out there and running the floor, she's very hard to defend. I mean, she's like a tight end. She's like Noah Fant out there, is what I kind of would say at that position. And, she runs the floor on the break with Caitlin Clark. Nobody's stopping her. Nobody. And what they consistently need is, they need a secondary perimeter shooter to be consistent. And when Gabby Marshall was doing it last year, she was great. She struggled somewhat this year. She's hit some shots, but they need that consistent outside shot to go along with it, because Kate Martin's going to do her thing. And I like, whether that's Gabby, or if it's Taylor McCabe or Kylie Feuerbach or somebody, they're going to need somebody to hit 3-3-pointers a game, just so you can keep everybody from buzzing around Caitlin.
Yeah, it's just, this team is at a certain level, and you kind of work towards that postseason, right? Because that's really what this team's going to be judged on, what you do in March. And you just have to steadily and continually work on the deficiencies you have, figure out, as Scott said, who are going to be those other shooters, who plays what role. It seems like, we talked about Goodman, Sydney Alfalter's taking on a nice role of kind of a defensive stopper, enforcer. Everybody's kind of figuring it out. It's a new team, right? So you want to just kind of build towards March and get things, work out those kinks, and get yourself playing at the highest level possible by the time you hit, the go time, so to speak.
Yeah. Because McKenna Warnock was really underrated in what she could do. She was a 4, so she could rebound and be tough inside, but she could also hit a lot of threes. Yeah. So she was a true stretch 4, whereas, Hannah Stolke is more of a power forward 4. And so then you got to replace what she can do offensively. And then you take out Monica Zanano, and then, Sharon Goodman's not Monica Zanano, I'm not making it a negative. It's just reality. So how do you replace what Zanano brought? Well, you got to figure it out, and it's organic, and they're trying to make it work. And, and then it's just about, they've compensated a little bit by going, smaller, Molly Davis getting in the starting lineup, and that's been good for them, and getting Kylie Feuerbach back, and probably inserting Taylor McCabe more in. And I think it's going to be a continual work in progress. They're going to lose some games. they're probably going to go on the road and get beat bad once. It's just going to happen. And so I hope the reactions are measured. I think for true Iowa women's fans, it will be. I think for the ones that are kind of football/men's basketball fans, it won't be. but you just got to weather it. It's all about March. That's all it's about.
Yep. And what you want to see is just steady improvement and chemistry being built, as the season goes on. And all signs are pointing to that working itself out. We don't have a ton of time, Scott. Want to hit a couple Festivus concerns, complaints, issues. I'll defer to you for most of these. I don't have a lot. I want to hit. I'm tired of the men's basketball attendance question. We've been talking about this for going on 25 or 30 years. I have no solution. I saw Beth Getz and Gary Bartas sitting together on press row last night. Hopefully they were putting their two heads together to figure something out. We talked about it off air. Iowa was 24th in the country in men's basketball attendance last year. It's not just Iowa. It's happening all over the country, but you have to address it here. Move the students, give them free pizza, do whatever you need to do, but it has to be addressed because we've heard through the years what cheapens the product when you give tickets away and all this other bullshit. Get people in the arena. You've got the resources to do it. Figure it out. Do I have all the answers? No, but you have to do something or it's going to continue to be bad.
Yeah, and I think once Beth's in that position permanently, then she'll have the authority and the cachet to be able to stand up and say, we're going to do this. Because she talked about it. She told me about it a couple months ago that, they are going to move the students at some point. But it's like, well, how much, but when are they going to do it? Well, she can't really answer that question because he's not the permanent AD.
Right.
When she does, then she can have a strategic plan and she can say, okay, we're going to do it this way. And we're going to even Gary, before he retired back in February or March, was telling me, he goes, if I had my way, we would cut it down by probably 3,000 seats and bring everything closer to the floor. But that costs money. And by then, they had so much stuff and then he retired. So it didn't really matter anyway. But so I would expect that to eventually be part of it. And certainly I do think the students are going to be there, but it's kind of chicken or the egg too. I mean, what happens if you bring them closer to the floor and they don't show up? Then what? Then you're looking at a real eyesore. Last night was a complete eyesore no matter what, but that's kind of to be expected. And as you said, the sport at large has a lot to blame. More games and a longer season is not the answer.
No. It's
like throwing more money at a problem. Education's bad. Let's just give them more money. And then it's, then I don't want to get political, but that's sometimes that doesn't work either, So I think that's the case here where, let's have exhibition games in October and the start of the season, the first week of November. And it's just more to get lost in this, in the college football world that we live in. And so I think, what can the program do? What can Iowa basketball do to do more? That's going to be the start. And I think, one among the things that we've witnessed over the last 10 years, Rob, is probably a deterioration of fan engagement. When, the PTL, after the first two nights, I was ready for it to go away, but it was a good opportunity for fans to see these players up close, for media to write and do stories in a time of year where there isn't a whole lot going on, and we could go over there and interview these players and watch them play and compete, and fans could get autographs and meet them and feel an investment with these players. It's gone, and then you look at
we would have been hearing about Owen Freeman and Brock Harding. Fans would have saw them in the summer.
Exactly.
And not now, and just now getting turned on to those guys.
Yeah. And just small little things like that. I mean, shirts and skins. I hated going over there before games to do it because a lot of times it was really hot. But still, people went there. You got a chance to watch them before a football game. The in-state series. I'm not going to criticize them for ending them, but that was a way, in early December for fans to watch the games and care about them. No offense to UMBC or Florida A&M, but it's not Drake and UNI. It's not going to Ames or going to Cedar Falls. It's not going to Des Moines. And then, and then getting dragged kicking and screaming to the Big Four Classic, and then getting that, lucky ticket that the Big Ten expands its schedule so you can get rid of that. What are you replacing it with? Well, and then, get rid of the ACC Big Ten Challenge. Okay, who is the non-conference team you're bringing in at home? Nobody. So you're removing all of these opportunities to bring fans in and interest fans, and you're not replacing it with anything. So that's, to me, the program's problem. The administration is, it seems like forever, it's just been, hey, come get your tickets, come to the game. Okay, what after that? I mean, other than ice cream, is there any food that's worth a shit there? No. Nobody, they've added beer because they can.
At least they had the dogs at halftime last night.
Yeah, that was pretty fun. You think about the people who are currently courtside, and how are you helping them? Why you're almost penalized because you're down so far, and then you got to walk all the way up those stairs, or you have one elevator for 500 people trying to use it. It's just, they make it very difficult for fans because, we make fun of them all the time, Rob, and we have for years, about leaving at the 4-minute mark or the 8-minute mark. Well, fans aren't, you can blame them and laugh at them and make fun of them, but, overall, they're right because they're the customer.
Right.
And so,
exactly.
And why don't you, I always noticed this when I went to Ohio State at the Value City Arena, they have ushers walking up and down those rows. I mean, why not have somebody with pop or beer or popcorn or whatever selling? Because you look at, somebody, 60 years old doesn't want to have to walk 80 steps upstairs to go get, because they're winded or it's, hot or whatever, to go get something to eat. They're just like, I'll just stay here. None of that is anything for the fan experience. So, so the sport contributes, the program contributes, but the administration contributes. It's kind of the three-legged stool that Gary Barr always likes to talk about. It applies to the issues with men's basketball. Women's basketball is in a different stratosphere because of Caitlin Clark, but that's something that needs to be addressed. But sorry for raining on your.
You need to be proactive there too. You need to take advantage of this and catch the lightning in the bottle and use it moving forward when she does leave. But you get the floor.
All right, I'm gonna go with social media, Rob. And
I had that written down too. So.
Yeah.
Don't be a shitty human.
Yeah, that's where it starts and ends. I can just leave it at that. But let's take last night, for instance. We present the Golden Gavel, which we've talked about. It's nothing but positive. I mean, we're celebrating somebody who's really good. And then I had somebody said, so the media's given an award to the least dickheaded player out there. No, dickhead. It's not about that. It's about saying, you know what, all these opportunities, and you've been a stand-up young man. We're celebrating you because yes, we're the people they talk to, but we're really more the filter, because you read about it, you see it, you hear it, and all of that comes through. And so, for people who have to be snarky with everything, who feel like it's funny, more often than not, it's stupid. It's like, shut the fuck up. I'm sorry, Rob.
You're fine.
You know how many times I want to write, you fucking whatever, after everything, but I signed a social media policy. I can't do that. I want to remain employed. And then, on my friends to the West, the Caitlin Clark effect, and how they have misinterpreted the whole thing because they want to be victims so badly that they've had their ass kissed for a century about being the best fans in America. And when somebody else challenges that, even in a positive way, or presents it in a way that's not easily understood because of your education level. And yet you read it and you feel compelled to respond because, damn it, he's not calling us the best fans in America, period. You're adding something to it. Then I have a problem with it.
Yes. It's whole social media, I don't even call it a phenomenon because it's not, it's longer than that. It's here to stay. And I would just caution people or advise people to act like you're talking to somebody when you're reacting instead of just flying off the handle and acting like, you have to defend something or waiting for somebody to make a mistake and jumping on it. It comes with the territory, Scott. We know that. I mean, we put, just for this season, for instance, we had the uncomfortable storyline of Brian Ferentz. So whenever you put something out there about the offense, it's people like, instead of staying on the topic, they want to go back down that road again and fight and be more productive because I've been there myself. I'm fighting with people on social media. It's just, there's really nothing to gain out of it anymore. And there's also no way to control people from doing it. People are going to be shitty humans on social media. Just know that with each day, I ignore you a little bit more.
I've, there are times I fight it and times I want to fight it. But I'm also kind of like Iowa's football team fighting with one arm behind my back. With Iowa, it's because they have their offense. And for me, it's because I can't use the words I choose to want to use. So I have to go with, my own brand of sarcasm to try to deflate it, to massage it in a way that's understood, yet not directly challenging and using words I really prefer to use, which I just did a few minutes ago. So I know better. I should know better. Just ignore it. Just move on. But when people are being blanks,
and it's hard to do. I mean, when it's constant, and it's like consistently coming at you. It's hard to kind of ignore it but I've gotten to the point now where I think it bothers people more when I don't respond.
Oh, it sure does. I can tell. And you've been better at it. And I need to learn from you from this because, people, I think last week's what started it was for me, there was like a sellout or something at the volleyball Final Four game. And somebody tagged me. It's like, yeah, it must be the Caitlin Clark effect. Ha ha, from Nebraska. And I'm like, here's what it is, guys. Iowa doesn't sell out volleyball. Iowa's terrible at volleyball. And of course, trying to fit it into 280 characters is very difficult. Iowa 0-20 in volleyball, yet it sold out because Nebraska was coming. So what I was trying to explain to Iowa fans that you guys looked at and misconstrued was, this is the Caitlin Clark effect in reverse. Somebody's coming here to take over, just like when Caitlin Clark goes on the road, that Iowa takes over, or at least people are going to those games. But, we've been doing this for years. We're the Big Red volleyball. And Caitlin Clark's only been doing this recently. Yeah, but I'm trying to explain it to Iowa fans because nobody goes to freaking volleyball here because they're 0-20. They should be better than that. It's a volleyball state, but they're not. But we're Big Red. Well, I know. Well, we have 5 national champions. We know that.
Believe me, I haven't seen all of it, but I've seen some of the exchanges you've had, and I'm just like, are people paying attention? Can you slow down for a minute and figure out that it's not about being right or winning an argument. It's about observing what is being discussed and having a conversation and not feeling like you're being disrespected. I think that's the worst part of this. Because in talking about Festivus, which I hate trying to say this with a straight face, but we went through this discussion somewhat last year about Festivus, about this being our main issue with you people.
Yeah.
It's just being respectful and being a good human and just try to understand what the other person is saying and not always being offended and being like you're being disrespected. It's just and I've gotten to the point now, Scott, where I know I'm not going to get through to people. It's not even about winning an argument anymore. It's just about getting somebody to understand your point of view maybe is different than theirs, or they're not understanding what you're trying to say, and they won't relent in their belief of what you're trying to say, even though, as you said, you're trying to compliment them.
Yes.
And they take it as it being a knock. It's just fucking just observe what's going on.
I'm like banging my head against the wall going, you guys don't understand. I'm complimenting you. I'm saying you're taking over the way Caitlin Clark does other. Well, but we've been doing this for years. I don't understand the comparison. And then, then I would get other ones. And this is where I started to mute and block. I started muting and then I went to blocking because I'm just like, I'm tired of this. And that was writing about the other day with Kirk Ferentz and who he's, the conversations he's had. And it's like, oh, it must be the Caitlin Clark effect. Oh, you fucking dumbass. Are you, I can't use that word. Are you that stupid? I mean, that's just what I'm, it drives me crazy because I'm like, I think
it's a collection of dense people and then trolls.
Yeah. Oh, it's no
that
question.
People are just trying to get under your skin.
Yeah, and they are.
And that's where I still get into it with some people. I got into it with somebody who took a shot at Mike Halas the other day for doing his job. And I didn't hold back on that one. But again, I said my piece and I muted him and I moved on. But I'm tired of trying to differentiate people that want to have a mature conversation about something and people that are trolls or dense and just don't want to know.
Yeah, exactly. And that's kind of where we are right now. It's just, this one, it was trying to compliment him and it turned into this, I'm disrespecting him. And it's like, I'm telling you, you're great, but I didn't tell you you're great enough because I compared you, God forbid, to somebody, a phenomenon from Iowa. And if you want me to get real here, everybody knows who fucking Caitlin Clark is, but they don't know who fucking anybody is for Nebraska. I'm sorry for using that word. I should have used that with that. But
I do, but I follow volleyball. But your point stands.
Yeah, I mean, and the sad part was I was kind of getting into the tournament. I was watching it. My wife loves it, so I'm watching it. And now Thursday night I also had the iPad up because I was watching Thursday night NFL. But I had it was on, and I was watching these games, and now all of a sudden it's like, fuck you guys. That's where I'm at right now, and it's sad. I really was starting to enjoy this, and now you guys are coming at me for this, and it's like, all right,
we're going to spend the next year before we get to Festivus 2024 continuing to work on our relationships with you people. Yes. Because the relationships we have now are not working. That is the basis of our Scott and I's combined gripe with all of you. So gather around the pole. You've heard it here.
Yes. And I need to be a better person. So I will try better to do that.
Let's all be better people in the new year. But happy holidays to everybody. Yes. If you want to hear more from Scott, he'll be doing another podcast here in about 10 minutes. So we're going to let him go. But happy holidays to everybody. We'll be back next week. Scott will be in Orlando. I'll be here. So we'll try to figure out a time that works for us. And I'll let you guys know on social media when the hotspot will be next week. But thank you, everybody, for listening. Thank you so much to our sponsors. Again, happy holidays to everybody. And we'll talk to you next week. Say goodbye, Scott.
Goodbye, Scott.